Ernie,
Joe, hi, can you hear me?
yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah,
Nice.
how are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you. Nice microphone. What do you got? You got some action going on in there.
Uh, what is it? It is a HyperX USB microphone. It goes through the RGB color cycles, and
Right
so
on.
red, blue, and green. And so I do a video podcast myself
Yeah,
for my business, and it's a nice conversation starter.
of
So
course it is.
yeah, so it's kind of nice and it works great. I mean, it's a great microphone. People say they can hear me clearly, so that's what's important.
It almost makes me think that you could have a microphone like a mirror ball and it would just kind of rotate and maybe have some lights
Ah,
come on. That
hey,
could be a little
there
daunting if it
I could
hits
do I could do a disco podcast then.
and it would be all 70s themed. Anything in the 70s would be the
Absolutely.
topic.
I'd have to grow an afro then, so I'd have to go
Every,
back.
yeah, we get some bell bottoms, get some big collars. We'd be in.
Yep, I'd have to put a Jackson 5 album on my wall then.
See, we've already started something. We're just beginning here and we got something going. So,
Yep,
hey,
absolutely.
it's nice to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate you doing so.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, before we get into your life, I want to know the last 3 years with COVID was quite a thing, quite an ordeal. It worked on all of us in its own way.
Yeah.
How did you survive it? And how has it changed the way that you do things now?
Well, the odd thing is, when I started the business, I worked out of my home office, which you see now, several years before COVID started. And then when COVID started, that's when I got a little antsy and a little anxious from being in the house all the time. Business wise, it's actually, COVID was actually beneficial for my business. It did not hurt my business at all. As a matter of fact, my business saw an uptick during COVID because what I do is I work with other companies. I work with software solution providers as well as some Fortune 1000 companies and some organizations, including a component of the Federal Reserve. And so during COVID, business continued, but a lot of organizations were looking for my help based on the research that I do in the finance space. So it actually turned out very well. So 2020 to 2022 were really good years for the business.
So, where are you located?
Located in Atlanta.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, I see Abbey Road and the guitars and all that. Are you a musician?
I am. I do it as a hobby. I'm a songwriter also. So
Okay.
I haven't. No one's actually performed anything that I've written, but I'm sort of building up to whatever the next chapter is after what I'm doing now.
Okay.
So I'm writing songs. I'm putting them in my file, my database. I'm copywriting them. So I'm just really building up my library. And my style is sort of a cross between um, the Delphonics, Elton John, and Stevie Wonder, all
Right
sort of
on.
rolled into one.
Right
So
on.
yeah, yep.
I have a jazz radio show. So the other day, I like to kind of play off of musicians, of people they've been around, and some correlation came up with Stevie Wonder, and I pulled up a clip of him playing Thelonious Monk at a jazz festival, and it was a
Oh,
trip. It was really good. Like, you
wow.
know, he had a Stevie spin on it, but I've always heard from people that meet him that
Hmm.
he is a absolute force. Like when he comes in the room, it's like it's
Yeah,
omnipresent.
yeah. He's. I noticed that the last time I saw him in concert, which was a phenomenal concert, and I love all types of music. I love jazz, rock, R&B, some country, pop, easy listening, some heavy metal. I'm sort of all over the place, and
Nice.
so I'm very eclectic when it comes to music, as long as it sounds good. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite Stevie Wonder albums is Hotter Than July. And so
Yeah.
it's a really good, it's not one of his Grammy winning 70s era albums, but it's a great album with some great songs. So I'll listen to that album and then right after that, I'll listen to Glenn Campbell's Wichita Lineman. And so I sometimes those songs are all in the same playlist for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So
It's the beauty of the modern world. You can really put together an eclectic digital playlist. It's nice.
absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I still
Yeah.
remember the first time I got an iPod. I was like, wow, like my whole I felt like that part in Back to the Future where the guy had the hazmat suit, he was playing Van Halen for him, and he was like, what
Yeah.
is this? It's
Yes, yes, because we used to carry around cassette players
uh
on our hip,
yeah,
and the microphones that go over the ears back in the 80s.
yeah,
That's what I was doing. And then you get the CD player, which is great, and then from the CD player to the MP3 player. So
yeah,
yeah, very, very convenient. And the funny thing about iPods, I still have a couple of iPods because Apple doesn't really make them anymore, other than the iPod that looks like a phone. And I was kind of disappointed by that, but
yeah,
I kind of understood why they did it because of their proprietary platform. You had to have iTunes, and you only could switch songs or manage your songs per computer.
yeah,
And so you couldn't just take today's MP3 player and just, regardless of what computer or what platform, just swing over and sort of drag and drop songs and MP3s into your modern MP3 player. So I still have a couple of iPods, but I still have a couple of newer MP3 players because simply they're just easier to manage. But
yeah.
I still love the iPod.
Absolutely. I worked with the guy that used to tell me back in the 70s, he had an 8-track player in his car, and I think it was Led Zeppelin 4. They'd have to turn the actual tape over to finish the song.
Yeah.
How archaic is that?
Yeah, boy, I look, Joe, I remember my parents in the 70s had 8-track tape players in the car.
And
And I remember one of my favorite albums that I used to play when I was as early as I can remember was Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water.
yeah,
And so they had that 8-track cassette, and I would wear that thing out in the early 70s. And
wow.
I love the songwriting and the music even back then, even before I even knew that I would pick up the guitar later on.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great album. Um, let's
Yeah.
get to the essence of what you do on a daily basis. And what I want to do is I'm going to put you hypothetically in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of the kids looks up at
Okay.
you and says, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I do a couple of things, but primarily my business, I run a business, Receivable Savvy. And what Receivable Savvy does is we do market research in the area or particular niche of finance. So an area that deals with numbers and companies and businesses, we do market research around that. So we poll finance professionals, CFOs, finance directors, and we ask them, how do you feel and what do you think about your practices, what you do for your businesses, what software you like, which ones you don't like, what are the things you like about it, what are the things you don't like about it. So it's sort of a consumer reports, if you will, in this area of finance. So we do research around that, and then we take that research and we write content from it. And so the content could be everything from blogs and articles to white papers to we even create an interactive dashboard. So for the truly nerdy finance people, you can go into our interactive dashboard and press a number of filters and see, well, how does this software perform for this type of business in this industry at this size with this invoice volume? And so you can really narrow down
Wow.
search criteria and come to a conclusion about how software performs in your industry. And so that's what we do.
So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What'd you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be an architect. From the
Okay.
time I was 6 or 7 years old until the time I was 18, I wanted to be an architect because I have a creative side to me, and I was always building models and really enjoy. I knew who Mies van der Rohe was before anybody else, and I was just a kid. And so, I wanted to be an architect, but for whatever reason, I changed my mind, went into psychology for 2 years and hated it. in college, so I changed my major to marketing because I loved advertising also.
Yeah.
And so once I changed my major to marketing, I did a complete 180 in terms of my passion, et cetera. So, and I thought about, do I want to go back to school and start over again to go into architecture? And I decided it probably wasn't worth it after already having several years of college under my belt. But if I had, it's one of the very few things in life that if I ever had to go back and do that again, I would not major in psychology. I would stick with architecture. So
Yeah.
even though I love what I do, that's
Right.
one of probably three things I would change in my life.
Well, it seems like you commingle with the right and left side of your brain pretty well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because that's what I tell people all the time. I've got a nerdy left side of my brain and the right side is very creative and I have to separate those two. So running a business, you've got to use that left brain, that logical, that structure side of your business. And then in order to create campaigns, in order to write music and things of that nature, I have to just let go on my right side. And it's a balancing act, really.
Yeah.
And so, there are some people who are mostly left or mostly right. I tend to be like smack dab in the middle because even when my first job out of college, I had a chance to learn desktop publishing. The company that I worked for, they said, "Hey, do you want to learn desktop publishing?" And I said, "Yeah." So they taught me, they brought in somebody that taught me, and I picked it up right away. So I became their in-house creative director and did all the design layout for annual reports, quarterly reports, brochures, and a few other things. Learned print production, learned everything that has to do with graphic design and print production. But at the same time, the left side of my brain was always thinking, at some point, I want to start a business. That's always been in my heart, if you will.
Yeah.
And there's the process of starting a corporation, filing your paperwork, doing your taxes, structuring your organization so that everything gets taken care of, whether it's you're doing it or whether your employees are doing it or whether contractors are doing it, and then keeping track of all of that stuff. So it's always a balancing act, but I don't ever want to say that I would only do one or the other. I like doing both things. I like the creative side, but I also like the nerdy structure side.
Absolutely. That was my first gig at a school that was really serious, was desktop publishing, and it was a small healthcare consulting firm, and I learned a lot of stuff. I mean,
Mm,
because they'll throw you into different things if you're open to it. So it was really good.
right,
Good
right,
stepping stone.
right.
So let's delve back into your life a little bit. Where were you born and raised, and what were some of the seeds that were put into you to have this fascination with marketing and to become who you are today?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So fascinating place to grow up, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
I got spoiled with going to museums that were all free. And so it's different when you live somewhere else. I remember when I went to school, I went to Xavier in New Orleans to go to school. It's a Catholic university, and I grew up Catholic, and which is easy to do when you grow up in DC. And so first time in New Orleans, there's a museum, and I'm going to the museum, and they say, "Well, you have to pay X amount." I'm like, "What? What do you mean you have to pay?" So growing up in DC, fascinating place. You see everything from it's a very international city.
Yeah.
Certainly the environment has changed since I grew up there. There was certainly a lot of crime. There's crime there now, but there's certain pockets of DC where back in the 70s and 80s, I wouldn't be caught dead in, no pun intended. But now you go back those same areas, they've got a Whole Foods. I remember seeing a little old lady walking home at 2 o'clock in the morning with her groceries. And so back in the 80s, if you're around 2 o'clock in the morning in that neighborhood, you're either looking for prostitutes or drugs or both. And so because I had this creative side to me, and the first time my parents took us to New York City, because Washington has no skyscrapers. Every building is about 13 stories high, and it's a city ordinance, and that's a long story, but there are no skyscrapers, and so we see them on TV, but we've never seen them in person. So my parents took us to New York City in '74, I think. So I'm a little kid, and I'm just fascinated by these tall buildings and these skyscrapers. And so I start drawing them, as kids will do. We draw what we see when we're kids. And so I'm drawing all these skyscrapers, and I'm just getting better and better. And I'm looking in the encyclopedias that we have about skyscrapers and architecture and engineering, et cetera. And so all these things are feeding my creativity. And I start building models of houses and of buildings. And I used to make my own toys when I was a kid. And so popsicle sticks, glue, um, other things that we used to use. I used to make, when Star Wars came out, I would make my own Millennium Falcon, out of balsa wood, things like that. And so, but at the same time, I'm watching a lot of TV, in the 70s when I'm growing up. And I'm fascinated by commercials. And oddly enough, I have just for fun, I created a couple of years ago a YouTube channel called The History of Television Commercials. And it's a deep dive into, it's like a mini documentary of certain commercials. And I haven't done many, I've only done two, but one of the more popular ones that I did was the "You Deserve a Break Today" commercial from McDonald's from 1970.
Yeah.
And so it's a fascinating, like 10-minute mini documentary. And so I've always been fascinated by commercials, and they're mini movies, and they actually get their point across. And so those were the initial seeds from watching a lot of television,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in the 70s,
Sure.
seeing commercials, and then somehow, even back then, understanding how companies and organizations configure their message in order to promote their brand. And so when I got into marketing in college and changed my major and started focusing on that, a lot of things came naturally to me because I had a knack for understanding how organizations position themselves to carve out real estate in people's minds, which that's what organizations do. So an
Yeah.
example would be Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, Apple Computer, among two of the most popular, strongest brands in the world, but they constantly advertise and promote their brand. I tell people that if Coca-Cola stopped advertising, period, even though it's the biggest brand in the world, their market share and their sales would plummet immediately 25 to 35%, and then more after that, because you constantly have to put yourself, as an organization, as a company, you have to constantly put yourself in front of your audience because they always have alternatives, especially now, 2023. Think about the things that we have at our fingertips compared to where we were in 1975. We've got multiple channels, we've got the internet, we've got multiple products serving a multitude of needs.
Yeah.
And so those things have grown exponentially since the 70s.
It's interesting you mentioned the commercials. I've always had this idea that why hasn't there been like a TV mogul like Ted Turner that came up with something called the Commercial Network, and it's all commercials. And you
Hmm.
have themes like around the Super Bowl, they play all the history of Super Bowl commercials,
Yeah,
holidays, Valentine's things, or one weekend it's fast food, or one weekend it's auto manufacturers, one weekend it's candy. It's like there's
yeah,
so many different things, and people would love that. I mean, and I'm talking like way back to like Lucky Strike, LSMFT. I mean, like
yeah,
go back and dig in. And I just
yeah.
think that would be great because it would pay for itself. It's commercials.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think a lot of organizations would love for their commercials to be shown in rotation, even if they're 20, 30, 40 years
Yeah.
old. you know.
Yes.
And so it's funny you mentioned that because that was sort of the impetus for me starting this YouTube channel. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to spend nearly enough time on it. And it's time consuming to put these mini documentaries together because you've got to
Yeah.
do the research, and then you've
Uh-huh.
got to do the writing of the script, and then the editing, and et cetera. And I tend to be a perfectionist to some degree when it comes to that. So it takes a while.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of looking at a way that I could do it on the side and sort of hire some people to do some more of the legwork than I would do, and just start to fill that out because there's so many commercials to do. I'd love to do a mini documentary on the Coke commercial. I'd love to teach the world to sing, or I'd like to teach the
Yeah.
world to sing, because there's also a Mad Men component to it. I'm a huge fan of Mad Men. Used to
Yeah.
watch it. I
Uh-huh.
sometimes watch the reruns, but the last episode, I hope I'm not giving anything away, but the last episode of the series was the thinking that Don Draper is conceptualizing that Coke commercial, because
Yeah.
the implication that he created it. Now, granted, in real life, someone from McCann Erickson did create that Coke ad. And so he, at the end of the series, he works for McCann Erickson. And so I think the creator of the series said, yeah, the implication is that Don Draper went to this commune in California, and he was thinking about things about his life, and then he came up with this commercial. And so that's the implication. So it would be a nice tie-in to do a mini documentary about that, as well as fold in some elements of Mad Men.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that was a great series. Yeah, yeah. Um, what is it for you every day when you wake up? You have things that get you out of bed, that get you moving. What's the ultimate motivator for you? What do you, what drives you?
Hmm. Um, Ultimately, what drives me? Well, not to get too religious on you, but I'm a follower of Christ, and I try to live my life by the instructions of the Bible, which some people may think is judgmental, but it's really just um, pertaining to me. It pertains to me and how I live my life. And so, first and foremost, my passion when I wake up every morning is how can I be a better person according to the Bible. And so, with that said, it that feeds into what I do for a living, because I always want to do my absolute best whatever I do. And so I wake up and I think, okay, I have another day to be my own boss, which I'm grateful for. I have an opportunity to hit certain milestones, whether it's delivering certain things for clients, or whether it's implementing some things to grow the business, or whether it's helping others who are budding entrepreneurs or small business owners, because I mentor entrepreneurs and small business owners on the side when I have time. And so when I think about those things, and I was thinking about that this morning, thinking, okay, I can't wait to get to my office here. I can't wait to have my coffee, say my prayers, get into my office and start to work. And I usually listen to music when I'm working. And so my day is filled with uh, communicating with the people that I hire, working with clients on conference calls. I may be on a call with a client 1 minute, and then the next hour I'm on a call with a subgroup of the Federal Reserve, because I'm volunteering my time for something that they're doing, that's a whole nother conversation. That's helping businesses, small and large. And so I enjoy everything that I do. I literally enjoy everything that I do. I'm one of the few people who, although I enjoy the weekend, Sunday night, I can't wait for Monday morning to start. Okay. And I usually, because again, that left side of my brain, I map out Sunday what I'm going to do during the week. And I have a to-do list, and I rank and prioritize which ones are most important, which ones are kind of important, and which ones are the least important. And so I try to discipline myself and tackle those things that are most important, because we have a tendency sometimes to do the things that we like to do instead of doing the things that we really have to do. And so I try to do the things that I have to do before, and then I treat myself every couple of hours with something that I like to do. And so I go back and forth and back and forth. And so that's kind of how my day starts. I think about, what can I start on? What can I work on? Who can I talk to continue to enjoy what I do? And I don't take it for granted either. It's something that I feel very blessed to be able to do. I'm grateful to be able to do it, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
So, as someone that's fascinated with a lot of things in life, if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now and spend a little time with them, who'd it be?
Oh my goodness, that's Joe. That's Do you have another hour?
That's right. Whole other branch.
Man, who would I meet? Oh boy, sheesh. That's a tough one. You know what? That is so tough. Um, you know, and this is by no means well, hold on. Who would I meet? Um, Tell you what, can I have a minute? Can we talk
Yeah.
about something else? And I
Let's
have a minute.
circle. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's circle back around. So, maybe this will get the juices flowing.
Yeah.
Who's been a hero for you in your life?
Yeah. That's an easy question. Okay. So there are two parts to it. The first part is the easy answer is my father. My father has been my primary mentor, and he passed away a number of years ago. But growing up, having a father like him, who was, and I always say I'm my father's son because there are a number of great qualities that I saw in my father. And so, from his entrepreneurship, I mean, he worked for the federal government because it's easy to do that in DC. Both my parents did, but my father had a number of businesses on the side. He did taxes. He got into a couple of multi-level marketing programs, which he enjoyed. And so I was with him during those times when he would go to these meetings, or I would help him on the weekends when he's doing people's taxes after hours. And I just that's sort of where I got that entrepreneurial bug. And so, but I saw in him a decency that seemed to be uncommon to some degree. So one of the things that I always say that stuck with me, and I'm grateful that my parents stayed together because we know, in today's world, in the last 20, 30, 40 years, that's not always the case. And so I'm grateful that my parents stayed together, till death did they part. And the one thing that I can honestly say about my father, he was a very good looking guy. Okay. I never saw him once flirt with any woman other than my mother. And so there was never even a hint of he's doing this, he's doing that. And he was a deacon in the church, which, sometimes um that has its own thing where people get drunk off of that, because they try to take advantage of the situation. But he also was involved in a few other things in the community, in business, etc. And I would hang with him sometimes, and I've never seen him once flirt or do anything inappropriate with any woman. And so I was grateful for that. And so I've that stuck with me. And so, I sort of carried that with me as well. Because when I was married, I'm divorced, but when I was married, I was the same way. I never even flirted with a woman. And so my father is my number one hero. Others, um, there are people that I came across who I got a chance to know in business, that mentored me and helped me. One in particular, my first job out of college, a gentleman who was the VP of communications who hired me away from the marketing side of our department in our company to be a communications manager. And so he's the one that taught me, or that allowed me to learn the desktop publishing on the Mac, et cetera. And he helped me to become a better writer because I wrote in high school, I wrote for the newsletter, et cetera. But when I got to a real job, I learned quickly how to write better, because I wasn't a journalism major, I was a marketing major. And so he really helped me. And when I moved down here from New Jersey, because I moved to New Jersey to work that job straight out of college, when I moved down here, he knew a number of people in Atlanta and he put me in touch with them. And so I was grateful for that. I was also grateful for, I have a cousin who I grew up with, who I've always looked up to him. One of the reasons I went to the high school I did was because he went to that high school, and he's 4 years older than I am. And so, I've always looked up to him. He and I are, still close. And so we talk somewhat regularly. We talk about business, about life, etc. Love his family, love his kids. And then there are a couple of people now who help me in terms of when I've got challenges and things that I have to make decisions about, uh, regarding the business or regarding something in my life. There are a couple of people that I look to now who are very good friends that, I bounce things off of them. I say, hey, I need to bounce something off of you. I want to get some input that's outside of my own head. And so, they help me and they give me a lot of great perspective on things. And so that helps me. So first of all, it all starts with my father. And then there are people in my career who have helped me, and then a couple of friends that I have now.
So everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you ultimately live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I think my perception of myself is similar to what my friends might say about me. So if you ask some of my friends would say that I'm a couple of things. I'm very good at what I do. You know, I've got a marketing brain, a business mind, etc. But they would also say that I'm very kind. I get along with everyone. And so I'm one of those people where if I have any enemies, I probably don't know who they are. Um, because I always make a point to, and this is a very biblical principle, to get along with everybody that you possibly can. And there may be some people that don't like me, but I have no control over that.
Yeah.
But I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's difficult because you have to make difficult decisions about if if I were that other person, would I want to treat me the same way? And sometimes, because we're all born inherently selfish, so we have to sometimes work through that. And so I try my best to work through that and treat people the way I want to be treated in business and in my personal life. So I think people would say that I'm a really good guy. I'm a good friend, and that I treat people the way I want to be treated.
So, Ernie, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where can they go on the web?
They can go to my LinkedIn page is under Ernie Martin, so anyone can go to my LinkedIn page. You can also go to Receivable Savvy, receivable.savvy.com. It's all one word.com. That's the location of my business. And then also, I'm an author. So I just wrote a book, published it last month, titled Nobody Cares About Your Business. It's sort of a culmination of all the things that I teach and share with people that I mentor, whether they be entrepreneurs or small business owners, about marketing, branding, starting a business, whether or not you should be an entrepreneur, because it's not cut out for everybody.
Yeah.
You can find that book on Amazon. And again, it's titled Nobody Cares About Your Business. It's available in Kindle format as well as paperback.
Last chance. Who are you going to meet?
Who am I going to meet? Ooh, man. Okay. So if I had to meet someone, um, I would probably meet um, you know, there are probably several others that I would probably include here, but I'm going to say I would meet the creator of Mad Men. And so I'd love to have a conversation with him and pick his brain, because one of the things about that show is watching movies from the 60s, including The Best of Everything and How to Succeed in Business Without Trying. Those are movies that I watched as a kid. And, again, that's me being a nerd. And so to capture that essence from the 60s is fascinating to me. And he was able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to pick his brain about how he created Mad Men, his experience working on the show The Sopranos, etc. Because I've got a couple of friends who are developing shows right now to pitch to different streaming services or networks. And I'd love to pick his brain about how he did that, because I could probably incorporate some of those things in my YouTube channel of the history of television commercials, and maybe even more. So that's one person I can think of off the top of my head. There are others, like I'd love to meet Stevie Wonder,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah, totally. Hey, man, this has been great. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for kind of giving us a portal into your world. It's fascinating, man. I appreciate it. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for inviting me again. I appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to promoting it whenever it's available.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get it over to you. Thank you, man. Good luck with
All
everything.
right. Thank you,
Take
Joe.
care.
You too.
See
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.